Hey guys, welcome to the 2 a.m. pipe on the patio. Today I'm doing a little video on my musical journey, and this is just part one of it. This is a response to prior dude who a couple months ago did a video to me. But this first part is just discovering the blues. And when I first started out, of course it was the Beatles. They were the big thing. I'm 59, so I was like 5 when the Beatles came to the United States, and my brother was 9 years older than me. My sisters were both older than me, so they were all into the Beatles. So I got into the Beatles, and then I got into Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and then my brother turned me on to Cream, and I was just all about Cream for a couple years, 3 years. And then one day we were watching a movie called The Watermelon Man with Godfrey Cambridge. And it was a good movie. It was it would be dated now if you watched it, I'm sure, but at the time it was a really good movie. About a white guy who becomes black overnight, and how everything changes for him. His wife divorces him, his friends hate him. Everything changes because he became a black guy. But in this movie, there was this music. And when I heard this music, I literally gasped. And I just asked my brother, what is that? What kind of music is that? And he said, that's the blues. And I said, well, who plays the blues? And he says, Eric Clapton, Cream, plays the blues. Well, I had never heard Cream play anything even remotely like this music I had heard on here. And I believe it was Furry Lewis that was playing the music on there. Well, this music was raw, it was emotional, it was a little unsettling, and I was just spellbound by it. And the next day my brother came home and he gave me a T-Bone Walker album. It was the complete Imperial sides of T-Bone Walker, double album. And I put that on my turntable, and I would put that on at night, and I'd put it on so it would just continuously play all night long, and that was all I listened to. But T-Bone Walker wasn't like this music I had heard. It was smoother, it was jazzier, it was, he wasn't raw like this music was. And so I started reading articles, going to the library and reading articles, and articles with Eric Clapton. And on the liner notes of this album, there was talking about T-Bone Walker's influences. And so I started reading, that, and then going and reading Eric Clapton's influences, and so I started working my way back, and I went out and I bought a T-Bone or a Freddie King's Hideaway album, and that was just eye-opening to me. It was like I'd never heard. That just amazed me. And even though T-Bone Walker was before Freddie King was much more raw than T-Bone Walker was. So then I started reading about Freddie King and reading his influences and working back from him. And I went to, got into Albert King and B.B. King and Otis Rush, and every step that I took was just amazing. This music was just amazing, and it was like seeing a piece of heaven opening up to me with every step I took. And then I went back from there, and I went back to and this was the big thing for me, was finding Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters changed everything for me. Muddy Waters was that rawness that I had heard from Furry Lewis. He had that. His early stuff was very raw and powerful, but without being loud. You know, like Cream was powerful, but it was loud. Muddy was powerful, and he didn't have to be loud. And that just was mind-boggling to me. And then, so I spent a lot of time with Muddy Waters. And then, of course, I found, through Muddy Waters, I found Little Walter and James Cotton, Jerry Portnoy, you know, all these guys, the great harmonica players. Big Walter Horton. It was just, you know, Muddy's band was just the best of the best. It was the cream of the crop, and Muddy was good about pushing them out of the nest when they were ready. You know, he'd say, "Man, you need to, you know, go on," and you know, Willie Dixon, and then I found Howlin' Wolf, and Howlin' Wolf was just this huge voice, huge, raw, emotional music. And I started going back from there, and I found, like, you know, Big Bill Broonzy and the acoustic blues guys, Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, Blind Boy Fuller, and you know, I just started going backwards to all those guys, and Reverend Gary Davis, and then I hit the jackpot, and I discovered Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson was everything I had heard on that movie, plus. Robert Johnson scared me when I first heard him. It was hard to listen to. It was just because it scared me. It was so raw, so emotional. I always liked to listen to music with the lights off, and I couldn't do that with Robert Johnson. It took me a long while before I would listen to Robert Johnson with the lights out. And when I do that, I hear the music, and just the music. I'm not looking around the room. I'm not reading anything. I'm not holding the album, reading the cover. I'm just listening to the music, and that changed everything for me. And all I wanted to do was play the blues. And then, so I went from Robert Johnson, and then I started working my way back, and I went, you know, I found like Mississippi Fred McDowell, Otis Rush, so many great players. Blind Blake, all the Piedmont guys, the Memphis guys, the St. Louis blues stuff, and it just, there was like this, I'm still discovering stuff, you know, 40 years later, 50 years later, I'm still finding stuff. That's the beauty of this journey. And God, I just love the blues. And so when I was about 25, I was introduced to Tomcat Cortney, the blues guitarist. was in a guitar shop that I happened to go into, and the owner knew me and introduced me to Tomcat. Tomcat and I played together for about an hour, and Tomcat invited me down to sit in with him that night, or the next Thursday night rather. He was playing Thursday. So I went down and sat in with him, and he invited me to join his band. And well, I jumped at it, man. It was like, this is the real thing, you know. And Tomcat was raw. He was raw blues. And a disciple of Lightning Hopkins, but electric. And there was another guy in that circle of musicians with Tomcat named Ken Shopmeyer, who was probably the finest harmonica player I personally have ever heard, and I've heard all the greats, you know. Ken was amazing. He could not only play harp better than anybody I've heard, but he could sing. I mean, he was singing like just like he could not believe how good this guy could sing, and then blow these amazing harp solos. It was just amazing to hear him. Well, he kind of took me under his wing, and he took me over to his house one day, invited me over to his house, and I went into his house, and he started putting on records. He was putting on like Ray Charles, and he said, now listen to his voice on this one, listen to this. And then he put on Hollywood Fats. Now, if you've never heard Hollywood Fats was a West Coast blues guy, amazing guitar player. I think it was Freddie King that gave him his nickname Hollywood Fats. He could play, he could flat play. But we were listening to that record, and Ken started telling me, now listen to this, listen to this, listen to the tonality of his guitar, listen to what he does right here and what the bass is doing against it, and listen to how the drums are playing here. And he taught me to hear how the blues was supposed to be played, not just as this one thing, you know, so this is the blues. It was a symphony, and each thing had a specific part that needed to be played in order for it to be played correctly. And Ken taught me so much, and I miss that guy. He took his life several years ago, and I just miss him dearly. He was a good friend, and I talked to him the week before and just had no idea. But he taught me so much about listening and playing it correctly and doing it right. And that you shouldn't overplay. He told me that blues guitar playing at its best should be imitating the human voice, and the human voice breathes. That was powerful for me to hear that. You know, instead of just, you know, non-stop noodling like a lot of people do, he'd say it's important what you don't play. And that's always kind of stuck with me. And you know, sometimes I still overdo it, but it's important to play right and to play the music correctly. But the blues has been my mistress since I was 14 years old. So what's that, 45 years? And I still am in love with the blues. And I'm still discovering things all the time, new things that I haven't heard before. It's just an amazing idiom, the blues. So this is part one. This is just discovering the blues. And then later on down the road. I'm not going to do a bunch of them right in a row, but I'll do another one discovering the Allman Brothers. Have a good one.